And if you can get these 3 things right, you'll be way ahead and you'll know everything you need to know for the PLE, and you'll pass the exam and you'll become a licensed MD. So in this video, I'm going to take my 8 years of experience on how to study for the PLE and condense it into a 3-part framework that I would follow if I were studying for the PLE from scratch today. And I call this the MedQBank Blueprint because that's also the name of my question bank. And over the last 3 years, I've taught the system to more than 800 students. Now this framework has 3 stages, and if you haven't started studying yet, or maybe you've skinned a few study materials but haven't studied seriously, or even if you've taken PLE before and you didn't make it or just decided to take it later, this video is for you. So we'll start with stage 1, which is the early stage. Now this early stage refers to the period before most review centers start their review programs, which is usually 2 or 3 months before the exam. So it basically covers a time period whether you're still doing your internship or you've already finished it or have enrolled in a review center but chose not to take the exam right after internship. And actually this is the stage when it's hardest to begin studying for the exam because you're tired after your hospital shifts and most of your friends aren't even studying yet because they think that the exam's still far away, and also because you don't have a structured schedule either, and you don't have the right study materials and you don't know where or how to start. And I get it, everyone's situation is different, and some students or some interns are rotating in busy hospitals and they don't have the energy left when they get home, but other interns, they are doing their internships in more chill hospitals with downtime where they can squeeze in a bit of studying. But the truth is, it's during this time when you should force yourself to start studying. I mean, not by going full intense mode with your study schedule, because I know it's still better to enjoy internship and hang out with your friends on your off days, but I think you can still start building your study momentum during this stage. And the biggest struggle at this stage is that you don't know what to study first, because if you go straight into reading your handouts or your review books, it's going to be painfully boring because you won't know what's important and what's not. But what really helped me during this stage was doing 50 to 100 practice tests a week or every 2 weeks. So for example, if you're doing your internship in one of the big 4 rotations like internal medicine, surgery, OBGYN, or pediatrics, then focus on doing practice tests on those subjects. And if you're in other rotations, then do practice tests on the basic sciences instead. And the reason for doing practice tests this early is that it helps you see what topics usually come out in the exam and how the questions are framed, which then saves you from wasting time memorizing details or information that have a low chance of coming out in the exam. And the best part is that it makes internship more interesting because when you do practice tests, every patient clinical case suddenly makes more sense and would feel much more relevant to you. Like, I remember when I was an intern and I was assisting in an appendectomy, I had done a surgery practice test about a week before, and at the time, I remember making a lot of mistakes in the appendicitis questions. And so during the actual procedure, while I was assisting the surgeon, I found myself paying much more attention to the operation, like the structures in the surgical field or the landmarks, the causes and the signs and symptoms of appendicitis. And I was mentally going through everything, and what used to feel boring suddenly became more interesting and relevant to the stuff that I was reading on the textbook. And that's the benefit of doing practice tests in stage 1. Like, they help you build a solid knowledge base so that by the time you reach stage 2, the intensive review stage, is you're building on what you already know instead of starting from 0. And that brings us to stage 2, the intensive review stage. Now, this is the stage when you've finished internship and you're now enrolled in a review center. Now, this usually lasts around 2 or 3 months in what most people call the review season. And so you're following the schedule of the review center, like you're watching the lectures, reading handouts, and that's fine. But the problem is that during this stage, most students become passive learners. Like, they watch all the lecture videos, they read all the handouts, but they don't ever test themselves on the study material. And then when they finally do a mock exam or they try to do a practice test, they soon realize that they never really learned or remember most of what they studied. Like, I've mentored a lot of students who were not able to make it on their first, second, or third, or even 5th attempt. And whenever I asked them about their previous strategy, the pattern was always the same. Like, they either didn't finish the study materials or they did finish everything, but they never tested the recall of the information that they have studied. And they were wondering why, after all of that effort, they still didn't pass the exam. And so during this stage, I would suggest to still follow the review center's schedule, but I would include practice tests before and after each subject block. For example, when you look at the study schedule of the review center and you see that biochemistry is like scheduled for 5 days, I would suggest doing 50 to 100 practice tests on day 1 before even studying biochemistry, and then another 50 to 100 on day 5 after finishing the topic. And you'll probably get low scores in the first set of practice tests, but that's totally fine because that's the point. Because those mistakes that you made on the practice tests will make the right answers stand out more when you finally get to studying the handouts and the lectures. And by the time you do another set of practice tests at the end of the subject block, you'll be able to get a higher score and remember the information much better. Because you have to remember that it's much better to make the mistakes now when it doesn't matter, like when no one is grading you and no one's keeping score, than to make the same mistakes on the actual exam. Now, once you're deep into the intensive review stage, 2 weeks before the exam, you'll enter what I call as the final stage. And that's where everything you've read and studied gets tested, whether you really learn and remember them to pass the exam. And there's actually just 3 things. There are only 3 things that you need to make sure you do when it comes to studying for the PLE and passing the exam. And if you can get these 3 things right, you'll be way ahead and you'll know everything you need to know for the PLE, and you'll pass the exam and you'll become a licensed MD. And those 3 things are, first one is doing a total of 100 to 200 practice tests for each of the 12 subjects. Number 2 is identifying your knowledge gaps. And number 3 is studying the topics in the practice tests in more depth. Now, firstly, your goal should be to do 100 to 200 practice tests for each of the 12 subjects, because this is the final stage, which is the last 2 weeks before the exam. And by this time, you've already gone through all 12 subjects in the review program of the review center. But what I see most students do at this stage is they panic and they try to catch up on their backlogs, rewatch videos, or reread handouts. But that's not what you should be doing at this point, because this is where you have to be trying to find out what you still don't know. And you have to try to make as many mistakes as possible before the exam, because either way, you're gonna make those mistakes. The only difference is whether you make them now or you make them during the actual exam. And you have to think of taking the exam as like learning a skill. Like if you wanted to learn how to play the guitar, you wouldn't read a 100-page manual on how to play the guitar. You'd pick up the guitar and start playing the guitar. And so taking the exam works the same way. Like you have to practice doing the thing itself, like reading questions under time pressure or eliminating the wrong options and coming up with your own answer. And that's why at this stage, it's much better to stop rewatching the lectures or rereading the handouts and just spend your time doing practice tests instead. So if you reach the end of this video and you want to find practice tests designed specifically for the PLE so you can pass your exam and become a licensed MD, you can sign up for a subscription to MedQBank, and you'll also get exclusive access to our Telegram channel where I share study tips and techniques on how to prepare for the exam. And many students, both first-time PLE takers and retakers, have used MedQBank and finally passed their PLE and achieved their dream of becoming licensed MDs. And if you want to do the same, the link is in the video description below. And if you like this video, you might also want to check out this video over here. It has 3 things that you can do to study much faster and more effectively. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in that video. Bye.